Good morning. Russian Orientalist painter Vasily Vereshchagin's Japanese journals as a complementing source for his Japanese series of paintings is my topic. World-renowned leader of Russian battle and Orientalist painters, Vasily Vereshchagin was also an avid traveler and visual journalist of the East, covering in his journals many a land of Central Asia, Middle and Far East. His last trip was to Japan during the Russian-Japanese War, where he perished in an explosion of a battleship. Yet known and lauded for his brilliant and anthropologically precise paintings of people, places, and battles, Vereshchagin remains underappreciated as the author of very accurate, spot-on observations found in his travel journals and letters. His notes on Japan, everyday life in Tokyo and Kyoto, his love for the Japanese landscape, his interest in Japanese Buddhist and Shinto cults and somewhat idiosyncratic descriptions of local people still haven't been reviewed by scholars of Asia in the depth that they deserve, even though they are an invaluable source of not only ethnographic, but also historic and psychological field of academic research. My talk, illustrated by rare images of Vereshchagin's Japanese corpus of paintings, I will try to demonstrate how visual information gets artistically processed by verbalizing it. Vereshchagin was lucky enough to be well known not only in Russia, but also in Europe. He traveled a lot, served as a draftsman in Russian army and navy, first-handedly observed multiple wars, war heroism, atrocities, and victims. Vereshchagin worked within Russian realistic tradition and gained much praise for his true-to-life depiction of Eastern peoples, their architecture, phenotypes, costumes, and genre subjects. But Vereshchagin was not only that, though through his art he proved himself as one of the first real Russian anthropologists. He was also an acute observer, thinker, a humanist, and a philosopher. According to Vereshchagin's son, this hatred of war in his father's works was so obvious that German Field Marshal Moltke, who visited Vereshchagin's exhibition in Berlin in 1882, prohibited his military staff from seeing it. The most famous Vereshchagin's painting, War Apotheosis, is not a work of a battle painter. It is a work of a great humanistic mind, well known to every Russian schoolchild. Vereshchagin not just painted and sketched from nature. His scenes and portraits were distinguished by his acute observation skills, which are somehow doubled by detailed notes in his diary. Though main travel routes led the artist to the Caucasus, to the Balkans, to India, to Russian and Chinese Turkestan, he dreamt of Japan for all his life, and somehow it was Japan and his works on Japan that framed his art and life. Because the brave traveler and warrior as he was, he became one of the victims of war when the battleship Petropavlovsk, carrying passengers, among whom was Vereshchagin, was bombed and exploded in 1904, killing everyone on board, including Admiral Stepan Makarov. Vereshchagin traveled to Japan planning to explore and sketch its Shinto shrines twice. First in 1903, and then in the last months of his life. In 1904, his main destination was Nikko, the famous spectacular mountain location, dotted with both Shinto and Buddhist temples against the gorgeous backdrop of luscious landscape. Reading Vereshchagin's journal, one could not help to note his artistic view on the country of the rising sun. He is charmed by the colors of rice fields that are framed by vegetables and bean beds. He is taken aback by the heavy makeup of the Japanese geishas and somehow disappointed by the gray color of prevailing kimonos, so different from the pieces known in Europe. The artist was especially fascinated by the Japanese pine-like cryptomerias, their color and beauty. We like to mark Vereshchagin as an Orientalist painter, but when we speak about Orientalist art, we think of Romanticism and idealistic views. We presume that the Orientalistic artist is obliged to adorn his subjects, make them more pleasant for the European viewer's eye. This long tradition of romanticizing the East does not really apply to Vereshchagin, because on the one hand, he was a realist, but not a hyper-realist. And on the other hand, as with every true artist, first and foremost goal of his art was a quest for beauty, color, meaning, and truth. He was not one to put exoticism, ethnography, and unnecessary detail ahead of thought and idea. He tried to understand the culture and to make his viewers understand it by means of realistic, artistic manner. He wrote that he loved the sun most of all, but it was war that pursued him all the time. In two unfinished Japanese paintings, Vereshchagin's painting technique and his style suddenly changed drastically. Some art critics and viewers are taken aback by this style, seemingly impressionistic in intention, using different texture, intuitive brushed strokes, and even bold black contouring. What could be the reason for this mysterious transformation? In search of answers, I looked into Vereshchagin's diaries. An acute man-watcher and keen observer of mannerisms, quirks, and cultural differences, the artist wrote extensively about everything: his travel, his companions, his impressions of the country, its progress, its diligent and seemingly strange people, even about his enormous luggage chest with his paintings and sketching materials, and how it even had adventures of its own. Fans of Terry Pratchett will appreciate that. He discusses his talks with guardians and priests of some temples, his futile attempts to draw inside some of them, and even the Odyssey to obtain such a permit with the help of Russian official representative in Tokyo, Baron Osterman. But he does not specify anything at all that might concern the evolution of his artistic style. Neither does Vereshchagin speak about any artistic influences. In his journal, we find many an observation on temple decoration, dragons, ornaments, on the whole impression of the temple complexes against the landscape, and the idea of the ensemble created by the Japanese nature, its temple architecture, and the ability of the common Japanese people to enjoy and cherish the beauty. But it is left unknown whether Vereshchagin was ever actually exposed to any examples of Japanese art besides temple decoration and architecture. Had he studied Japanese woodblock prints? Was he familiar with the works of Hokusai and Hirosige? It seems that he was, because his two surviving and unfinished Japanese paintings, Boat Trip and The Walk, depicting river entertainments with women and parasols, rhyme with similar themes of the Japanese painters. It seems that his unexpected ability to build the picture with color rather than with sketching, his readiness to walk alla prima without preliminary drawing, was a natural result of his previous work in the East, where he learned how to depict bright sunlight and deep shadows, how to use material culture in order not to just show it as an exotic product connected with romanticized and generalized local beauties, but to feel the culture and show it as it is. We can argue with some certainty, therefore, that Vereshchagin's diaries, being a priceless account of a cultured Russian traveler in Japan, add nothing to the understanding of his latest artistic endeavors, his new style and manner. It seems that the artist translated his understanding of Far Eastern hieroglyphic idea of using black ink on white rice paper to using brush without preliminary pencil or charcoal drawing, and tried to appropriate this media to express his interpretation of Japan, which proved to be much more alien to Europe than Eastern Turkestan and India. His unmistakable gut feeling of the very essence of Japanese culture let Vereshchagin express the impressions of this country through impressionistic style, placing him, if not on quite the same level as Claude Monet and later Van Gogh, but in the same artistic movement, which Vereshchagin discovered all by himself, in his head and by his hand. Thank you for your attention.